Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Amichai and coming up in today's newscast. Amichai Chikli introducing a new initiative at the cabinet commemorating Jews murdered in anti-Semitic attacks. Meantime, breaking down all the latest as Israel takes necessary steps in Judea and Samaria. And later, authorities investing heavily in security and organization ahead of Lag BaOmer celebrations on the Meron Mountain. Diaspora Affairs Minister Amichai Chikli now introducing a new measure of commemorating Jews who were murdered abroad in anti-Semitic attacks. Here are the details. For the first time since the establishment of the State of Israel, the cabinet on Sunday decided to commemorate Jews who were murdered abroad in anti-Semitic attacks, even if they were not citizens of the state. The move, following a wave of anti-Semitic attacks around the globe, aims to deepen the connection between Israel and world Jewry. The proposal adopted by the cabinet was brought forward by the Minister for Diaspora Affairs, Amichai Chikli. His ministry will formulate the recommendations for recognizing Jews and non-Jews killed in anti-Semitic attacks abroad. And Chikli, on his Twitter account, broke down the three important achievements his ministry has been working on, writing, "Firstly, the government today approved the decision to recognize the obligation of the State of Israel, the State of the Jews, to recognize and commemorate the victims of hostilities who were murdered for being Jewish overseas, in the Hyper Kasher in Paris, the synagogue in Pittsburgh, or in the Chabad house in Mumbai. We thank the Ruderman Foundation and the Zionist Federation for their hard work that led us to this important decision." Secondly, together with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Minister Eli Cohen, the Israeli government today adopted the definition of the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance dealing with Holocaust distortion and denial, defining the IHRA as essential to the fight against rising anti-Semitism, and this specific decision will help Israel in its efforts to fight the distortion and denial of the memory of the Holocaust. And last but not least, we joined today with a significant financial investment in the government decision led by the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of Environmental Protection to restore the biblical site of Samaria, the capital of the ancient kingdom of Israel, which in recent years was burned and destroyed. Continuing on the same topic, the Israeli Defense Ministry is banning two organizations due to their tight link to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, with the U.S. Representative Betty McCollum opposing the ban. ILTV's William Sharon reports.
Israel's Defense Ministry banned both Adamir and the Defense for Children International Palestine last year due to their extensive ties to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which the United States also is designating as a terrorist group. And right now, U.S. Rep. Betty McCollum is taunting the support of these two organizations for a new bill seeking to condition U.S. aid to Israel. McCollum's new bill now seeks to prohibit Israel from using U.S. aid for, in the bill's wording, the military detention, abuse, or ill treatment of Palestinian children in Israeli military detention, the seizure and destruction of Palestinian property and homes, or unilateral annexation of Palestinian lands in violation of international humanitarian law. Among the sponsors of McCollum's bill are, among others, Representative Rashida Tlaib and Representative Ilhan Omar, who not once voiced their harsh opinions on the state of Israel, with Tlaib only in recent days calling Israel an apartheid state once again.
And joining me now to wrap up both stories is attorney and CEO of the International Legal Forum, Arsen Ostrovsky. Arsen, the dramatic rise in anti-Semitism in the United States and elsewhere is raising alarms here in Jerusalem. Is it the right time for Israel to take a more active role in combating the worldwide plague?
There's certainly never a wrong time to become more involved and determined in combating anti-Semitism. We've seen certainly from the last few years that anti-Semitism is like a virus that masks itself or manifests itself in different ways, shapes, and forms, both in attacks on Jews as individuals and increasingly so in terms of attacks on Israel as the Jewish collective state. So I think there certainly is a great degree of responsibility and onus upon also the state of Israel to become even more active in the fight against the scourge of anti-Semitism.
Can you imagine that on Israel Memorial Day, in addition to our lost soldiers in war and civilians in terror, we'll also commemorate victims of anti-Semitism, as Chikli, as he's suggesting right now?
Correct. I mean, look, I think that's a very important step, and Minister Chikli ought to be acknowledged and for taking this initiative, because I think it is also a fulfillment of Israel's moral obligation to Jews in the diaspora as well, with the attacks on Jews, whether it's the D family in the Jordan Valley just last month, or from Pittsburgh to Paris and the world over. Jews are being attacked for one reason only, because of our Jewish faith or because of our Jewish identity and connection to the state of Israel. So I think this is an important initiative, a very worthy initiative that the government and Mr. Chikli ought to be acknowledged and applauded for taking this step.
Arsen, how closely is the rise in Jew hatred actually connected to the rises in Israel hatred?
I think in so many ways they're intertwined. It's impossible to separate them, as we see, attacks on Jews as individuals, or we see anti-Semitism masquerading itself in terms of attacks on Zionism, where people are using Israel essentially as a charade or as to masquerade their own hatred, their own anti-Semitism, or to use it as an excuse. So in many ways, I think it is really intertwined, and therefore it's important that we be just as equally vigorous in terms of combating anti-Semitism when it manifests on attacks on us as individuals based on our faith, but also when it manifests in terms of the vilification and assaults on Israel's very legitimacy and right to exist as a nation state of the Jewish people.
Onto a different but connected topic, we see extreme Congress people in the U.S. really pushing really anti-Israel moves. The majority of Congress will reject them, but does this type of bill encourage anti-Israel and anti-Semitic sentiment also?
It certainly doesn't help. I think you're right in noting that the vast overwhelming majority of members of Congress are good, upstanding members who are very vociferous in terms of combating anti-Semitism and in their support for Israel. Unfortunately, there is a loud minority, some of the members you mentioned as well, who do contribute to this climate of hate and incitement. And we need to remember that the violence against Jews and the anti-Semitism doesn't occur in a vacuum. It is also, I think, a result of a pervasive kind of discourse that we're increasingly seeing. But in as much as there are a small group of members of Congress who are pushing these unfortunate and anti-Semitic and discriminatory bills, the vast overwhelming majority of members of Congress certainly stand up in the fight against Jew hatred and show their solidarity with Israel, and I think we need to underscore that.
Arsen, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for all the information.
Great, thank you.
Israel legally carried out the demolition of a dilapidated building that housed a European Union-funded Palestinian school near Bethlehem. The EU and PA both protested the Israeli move made necessary when it was determined by the courts that the flimsy structure was both illegally built on national parkland and did not meet safety standards. ILTV's Steve Leibovitz reports.
The illegal structure erected in 2017 next to the historical site Herodion on the edge of the Judean desert was called a safety hazard at risk of imminent collapse. The European Union and the Palestinian Authority both protested the Israeli move made necessary when it was determined by the courts that the flimsy school structure was both illegally built on park land and did not meet safety standards. Israeli civil administration engineers raised the structure, which Palestinians built with EU funding in 2017, without a permit in the Herodion National Park on the edge of the Judean desert. Following the demolition, there were clashes with stone-throwing rioters. Order was restored after a short time and no injuries were reported. The demolition followed a district court ruling from March, in which the structure was defined as a safety hazard at risk of imminent collapse. The move was the beginning of dealing with a larger issue. The Israeli nonprofit Regavim, dedicated to the protection of Israel's national lands and resources, says the so-called school was one of 100 illegal schools built throughout Area C of Judea and Samaria that are used cynically to cement the Palestinian hold on open areas.